0, the amendment passes. Representative Joe Markosek offers Amendment 6960. The clerk will read a summary of the amendment.
Amendment A-06960 strikes from the bill section requiring agencies to post the original unedited budget request documents to their website.
On the amendment, we recognize Representative Joe Markosek.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, taxpayers elected each and every one of us to do a budget every year and to do it well. No games, no tricks. Taxpayers understand that the budget process can be complicated. They realize that elected officials must strike an appropriate balance between the public's right to know and the internal discourse needed to develop a public proposal, which we often then call the governor's budget. He has the duty to do that. My amendment fixes two serious problems with my good friend, the gentleman from York's bill. First, it preserves the ability of the administration to prepare its budget proposal with candid internal discussion. After all, the governor's executive budget is, in fact, the governor's budget. Agencies have a role to play in preparing a budget, but it's the governor's responsibility to submit a budget proposal to us, the General Assembly. A good work product requires the administration to have the space to privately conduct its review of the budget and privately debate decisions. If not for the direct and time-honored practice of the governor beginning the annual budget process this way, then remember, we have a transparency law, a right to know, that explicitly recognizes that some conversations are internal. Documents related to pre-decisional budget recommendations and policies are expressly protected from public scrutiny by the right to know law. This bill would undo that protection because it would not allow the governor to take his agency's budget, his own agency's budget advice, and deliberate privately on it before reaching his public decisions contained in the executive budget. We do not require every internal budget proposal prepared by our staff to be made public. The Republicans don't do that. The Democrats don't do that. We do not require every draft piece of legislation to be posted to the legislative website. Preempting the executive budget and not allowing the governor to make his budget proposal with honest internal discussion is not a recipe for good budget policy. And this bill would do all of that. The second problem my amendment seeks to correct in this bill will be to protect us all from well-intentioned citizens who want to find budget appropriations at any time of the year. Opening the Commonwealth's accounting system, the SAP, this is a sophisticated accounting system, opening that to everyone would be like giving everyone a football helmet and telling them to go play in the NFL. It just wouldn't work. It's too complicated and too sophisticated, and the public is not going to understand it, and it is costly. to open that up and do that. Pennsylvanians are interested in the financial health of many entities. It could be a public company they work for or own stock in. It could be a church or a religious organization. It could be a club or a social organization. It could be their school or their state government. There are many tools to properly disclose financial information to inform decision makers and stakeholders. We have skilled professionals. We have financial statements. We have disclosure standards. We have discussion with the experts. We have audits. We have separate independent auditors. We have checks and balances. We have meetings and we have hearings, all of which take a lot of energy and expense, and we do all of that already. All of these tools are used to communicate accurate information to help make the best decision possible. Just providing access to a complex, sophisticated computer system without expertise, without knowledge of its structure, without knowledge of its nuances, without knowledge of its pitfalls, will not provide quality, reliable information. The implication of this bill is that the Democratic governor must be doing something wrong or secretive during his crafting of budget proposals. And he's doing nothing more than what every governor has ever done, both Democrat and Republican. This notion is unfair, and it is squarely partisan. And for that reason, it is wrong. Pennsylvania is in the economic situation it is in because of the one party in this General Assembly, the majority party, has not been managing the budget well for the past 8 years. Pennsylvania is not in financial straits because the public hasn't had access to the tools used in budget negotiations, analysts, and the governor. It's in economic distress because the General Assembly has not done its job in passing fair and well-funded budgets over the last many years. For that reason, I would ask that you support this amendment so that we clean this bill up and do what is fair, not only for us here, but for all Pennsylvanians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, Representative Dush, Representative Frank Ryan. Does anybody else wish to speak on this amendment? Representative Dush, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the maker of the amendment be willing to rise for a brief interrogation?
The good gentleman has indicated he will so stand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, does the maker, in saying that the public will not understand the systems, think that the public in general is just not capable? I have accountants, I have business owners that are able to understand spreadsheets, flow charts, able to understand expenditures and that sort of thing. When I came and when I was running for office in the first place, having worked in the government for over 20 years and seen how the different pots of money, even in the federal government, are misused.
Representative Dush, I'm sorry, I did this to a member yesterday and I apologize. You are certainly entitled to speak on the amendment. If you have a question, though, it's got to be a direct question.
It is, but I'm just my point of clarification.
You have to ask a direct question. I did say it to members on the other side of the aisle yesterday. Please, I have no problem with your speaking on the amendment, but if you're going to ask a question, ask a question.
All right. Mr. Speaker, my question is, if you're stating that the public won't be able to understand the systems, are you saying that accountants that are our constituents, that business owners that are our constituents, are not going to have the mental capacity to be able to actually look at these charts, look at these, and understand them?
Well, there are two things that this amendment does. One is it suggests that certain aspects of the budget are things that are currently done not in the public purview. They're done privately, just like your Appropriations Committee does, our Appropriations Committee does. There's a lot of bills that we all discuss quite a bit before we actually decide to put a bill in. I am suggesting through my amendment here that what the gentleman from York has suggested with his bill is that we take away all of that and we just negotiate out in public before the governor even has a chance to actually present his budget to us. I don't think you're going to get the best budget that you have. The other thing is there's another side to this. It's called the SAP system, which quite frankly, even after all of my years here, I'm not very familiar with. Most of my staff, and I think the staff on the other side, is not very familiar with it. It is highly complicated. It is highly nuanced. It is highly technical and sophisticated. And as a result of that, by just letting the public go into that system, which, by the way, would cost us a lot of additional money to begin with, which I know a lot of people here don't want to spend the money, we would have a situation where we would be giving we would have this particular item available to the public without properly explaining to them how it works and for them not knowing what it's like. As I mentioned in my comments here, it would be giving somebody an NFL football helmet and tell them, okay, here it is. You know what to do with it? Go out and play NFL football. They wouldn't be prepared. So this bill that my colleague has put together is flawed, and this amendment is trying to correct that and save the Commonwealth money.
Mr. Speaker, then, are you saying that most of our approach staff, most of the members don't have the ability to understand the SAP system?
They do not right now. It would cost a lot of money to train people to be able to understand that. I don't understand it. And if I don't understand it, how's everybody else going to understand it?
Respectfully, if the members of this House don't understand it, what are we doing wrong that we should not make this out there in the public so everybody else can see how messed up it is?
It's a very complex system, which I admit I don't understand. My guess is most of my staff doesn't understand it. Probably a lot of the staff on the other side doesn't understand it. And this is something that is very costly also, very costly. And I know how we all want to save money around here, especially some of our good friends on both sides of the aisle. So I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that I've answered the question, and I would ask you, sir, to please vote yes on my amendment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, respectfully, I'd like to ask, why is it so complicated? Why is it that we're in a position where it's so hard to understand?
Sir, my understanding is I think the good gentleman
The interrogation, I believe,
done
has
with
ended, Mr.
interrogation.
On the bills, Mr.
But you may
Speaker?
speak on the bill.
A number of interesting points have been raised here. In our research into this in the Common Sense Caucus, we found how complicated this was. In fact, when I first became familiar with the Ledger 5, it was because the executive branch was shifting money around, hidden from our view. I actually had a forensic accountant come in and take a look at the SAP reports, and his comment to me was, after he had been auditing the state of Florida's tax and budget, He said it's going to take a team of accountants years to figure this out. That's actually the point, I think, one of the points to the maker of this bill's whole intent, is that we've got to get this out there so that everybody can see how screwed up it is. Honestly, if the Appropriations Committee on either party at the amendments maker statement that they don't understand the system by which we undertake the budget process, we've got a serious problem here. We have people, accountants, business owners, who understand sound business practices. It's about time we put that information out there for everybody to see, so that we can have people that have solutions able to come to us and provide those solutions. I ask for your opposition to this amendment and support of the bill. Thank you.
Representative Grove, Representative Ryan waved off. Representative Grove on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to provide more transparency to the general public and the members in this esteemed body. The two provisions that this amendment addresses is, one, publication of agency budget documents. Agencies know more about their budgets than any of us ever hoped to know about a budget. Every year, we have to base decisions on what we can attain and ascertain. Having access to what the agencies put in their budget will only strengthen our ability and knowledge of the fiscal conditions of the Commonwealth, for good or for bad, but a realistic view of what our agencies are facing on a day-to-day basis. It's what the governor bases his decision on. We should have access to that information moving forward. And nothing in those documents preclude the agencies from removing any decisions or any discussion points of the budget. The governor can have that with his agencies anytime he wants. He can do that. Two, access to the state accounting system. To think that the members of this body and the general public are too stupid to actually access and utilize a computer program. There's just a school up here. I bet all those kids could utilize that system very, very, very easily, Mr. Speaker. For the life of me, I do not know why we want to hide spending and restrict financial documentation from the general public or for our own use in budgetary decisions, Mr. Speaker. I would ask a no vote on this, and maybe if the administration's open to further discussion. I did email them to ask them about their thoughts on this, and basically got a "we're not interested in working with you" response. So even during committee, my colleagues on the other side brought up some concerns around costs, and I tried to mitigate that through ensuring that there aren't any costs for the budget office. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, the Treasurer's Office did their complete transparency portal from the ground up without asking for one additional penny from the taxpayers. The hardworking workers, employees of the Treasury, did it on nights and weekends because they believe in providing greater access and greater financial knowledge to the general public and to this esteemed body. They've been great to work with. We ironed out any concerns they had in the last amendment. Mr. Speaker, that's the kind of camaraderie we should have, particularly dealing with transparency. Just last week, Mr. Speaker, a nationally recognized entity released their transparency report on all 50 states. Pennsylvania went from a B to a C in just under a year. Why? Because other states are surpassing us, and our transparency tools are subpar to those other entities, Mr. Speaker. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a no vote. Let's provide the taxpayers and the residents of this Commonwealth the amount of transparency they deserve on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Markosek on your amendment, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just briefly, again, to summarize, this is not necessarily all about transparency right here with this amendment. This is about the way we negotiate budgets, the way we should negotiate budgets and the best way to do that. My amendment, I think, keeps that in place, keeps the current system in place, and keep in mind, this would affect both governors. It would be, no matter who was in office, they would have to comply with this. So I would ask for an affirmative vote, and let's move on from there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Wheatley has requested to be placed on leave without objection. That will be granted. All those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Members will proceed to vote. Have all the members voted? Have all the members voted? And the clerk will record the vote. The nays are 113, the yeas are 76. The amendment does not pass. I don't see any other further amendments.